I, 28F, was 7 months pregnant with my first child, and my life felt perfect. My husband, Liam, 30M, was everything I had ever wanted. He was kind, supportive, and came from a family that had welcomed me with open arms. His father, David, was a respected man in our community, a pillar of strength who always had a warm word for me. His mother, Mary, was gentle and sweet, and my own mother, Karen, was overjoyed. She had raised me as a single parent, and seeing me so happy and settled was her greatest dream. At least, that was the story she always told me. The baby shower was a sea of pastel pinks and happy faces. Mary had organized most of it, but my mother had insisted on handling the gifts. She loved the ceremony of it, the grand presentation. She had a flair for the dramatic, something I used to find charming. Liam sat beside me, his hand resting on my swollen belly, his face beaming. I felt a wave of pure, uncomplicated happiness wash over me. Everything was exactly as it should be. The gifts were piled high. We received tiny outfits, soft blankets, a brand new stroller, and enough diapers to last for months. Each gift was met with oohs and ahs from our friends and family. Finally, there was only one box left. It was a simple, elegant white box tied with a silver ribbon. My mother stood up, her eyes sparkling. "This one is from me," she announced, her voice filled with a strange sort of pride. She placed it in my lap. It felt light, almost empty. I smiled at her, thanking her, and carefully undid the ribbon. Liam leaned in, curious to see what it was. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of white tissue paper, was a single, folded document. It looked official. I picked it up, my brow furrowing in confusion. I unfolded it. It was a birth certificate. My birth certificate. My name was printed in clear, bold letters at the top. My mother's name was listed correctly, but then my eyes scanned across to the space reserved for the father's name. It was not blank, as it had always been on my official documents. There was a name type there. David, Liam's father. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It felt like a misprint, a bizarre error. I looked up at my mother, expecting her to laugh and explain the mistake. But she was not laughing. She was watching me with an unreadable expression, a small, tight smile on her lips. I looked over at Liam. He was staring at the paper, his own smile gone, replaced by utter confusion. Then I looked at David. He was sitting across the room, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. He would not meet my eyes. The happy chatter of the room faded into a dull roar in my ears. The air grew thick and heavy. A cold dread, sharp and painful, began to creep up my spine. This was not a mistake, and judging by the look on my mother's face, this was not a joke. This was a message, a bomb, thrown into the middle of my perfect life, and my own mother had just lit the fuse. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" She finally broke her silence, letting out a light, airy laugh that sounded completely wrong in the tense room. "Oh, honey, it's just a little joke," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "A gag gift. You know, since David has been such a wonderful father figure to you." A few people in the room chuckled nervously, eager to believe her explanation. But I knew my mother. I knew her love for drama, for being the center of attention. This was more than that. This was cruel. Liam finally found his voice. "Mom, that's not funny," he said, his tone flat. He looked from the certificate to his father, then to my mother. "That's a really weird thing to do." David still said nothing. He just sat there, a statue carved from ice, staring at a fixed point on the floor. His wife, Mary, looked utterly bewildered. She put a hand on his arm, whispering something to him, but he did not seem to hear her. My mother's smile faltered for a second, seeing that her performance was not landing as she had hoped. "Oh, you two are so serious," she said, trying to rally. It's just a piece of paper. A novelty item I had made online. Lighten up. We are celebrating a baby. But the festive mood was shattered. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I folded the certificate, my hands trembling slightly, and placed it back in the box. I could not look at anyone. I felt dozens of eyes on me, filled with pity and curiosity. I was the star of a drama I never auditioned for. Humiliation washed over me, hot and suffocating. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to rewind time, back to an hour ago when my world was still whole. Liam squeezed my hand, a silent signal of support, but I could feel the tremor in his own fingers. He was just as lost as I was. He stood up, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Well, I think that's all the gifts," he announced to the room. "Thank you all so much for coming. Chloe and I are so grateful. Maybe we can cut the cake now?" His attempt to restore normalcy was valiant, but it was useless. The party limped to a conclusion. People made their excuses and left quickly, their whispers following them out the door. My mother tried to hug me goodbye, but I flinched away from her touch. "Don't be so dramatic, Chloe," she hissed under her breath, her smile now a venomous sneer. "You're ruining your own party." I did not answer her. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. Why would she do this? Why would she choose this day of all days to pull such a malicious stunt? The word joke echoed in my head, but it felt hollow, a lie designed to cover something much uglier. After she left, only Liam, his parents, and I remained in the wreckage of the celebration. Mary was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "David, what was that about?" she asked, her eyes pleading with her husband. Why would Karen do something so bizarre? David finally looked up, his face a mask of exhaustion. "I have no idea," he said, his voice raspy. "Karen has a strange sense of humor. You know that." His answer was weak, and we all knew it. He stood up abruptly. "We should go. Chloe needs to rest." He walked toward the door without another word, Mary trailing behind him, looking back at us with a worried expression. And then it was just Liam and me, standing in the middle of a room filled with pink balloons and broken trust. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a hug. "I am so sorry, sweetheart," he murmured into my hair. "My family, your mom, they're all crazy." I leaned against him, but I felt a strange distance between us. He was trying to comfort me, but he was also trying to dismiss what had happened, to file it away under family weirdness. But I could not do that. The image of that birth certificate was burned into my mind, the name David next to my own. It felt less like a joke and more like a confession my mother had gift-wrapped and presented to me in front of everyone I knew. I had a terrible, sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the birth certificate. I saw the smug look on my mother's face and the sheer panic on David's. Liam slept beside me, his breathing deep and even, but I felt utterly alone. He thought it was over, a terrible, awkward moment that we could move past. I knew it was not. The next morning, I tried to talk to him about it again. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea, the white gift box sitting between us like an unexploded bomb. "We need to talk about this, Liam," I said quietly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Chloe, can we please just drop it? It was a horrible, tasteless joke. Your mom crossed a line. My dad was embarrassed. Let's just forget it happened and move on." "How can I forget it?" I asked, my voice rising. "She didn't just tell a bad joke. She put your father's name on my birth certificate and gave it to me at my baby shower. There is a reason she did that. We need to know what it is." "What reason could there possibly be?" He shot back, his frustration growing. "That she's a narcissist who needs attention? We already knew that. That she has a sick sense of humor? We knew that too. What do you think is going on? That my dad is secretly your father? That's insane." His words hit me like a slap. He had said the unspeakable thing, The fear that had been festering in the back of my mind since I first unfolded that paper. Hearing him say it out loud, even in disbelief, made it feel terrifyingly real. Is it insane, Liam? I asked, my voice trembling. Think about it. The way they've always been with each other. A little too friendly, a little too familiar. The way he always looks at me. The way she always talks about him. How he was the only one who understood her after my dad left. My father left your mother before you were even born, Liam said, his voice firm as if stating a simple fact could erase my doubts. My parents have been happily married for over 30 years. They were high school sweethearts. You're creating a conspiracy theory out of a stupid, mean-spirited prank. Am I? I opened the box and slid the certificate across the table toward him. Look at it again. Look at the detail she went to. This wasn't a last-minute gag. She planned this. She wanted to cause this reaction. She wanted to plant this seed in my head. Why? He stared at the paper, his jaw tight. I don't know why, he admitted, his voice softer now. But I know my dad. He would never do that. He would never betray my mom, and he would never ever lie to me about something like that. His faith in his father was absolute. I almost envied him for it. My own faith in my mother had been corroding for years, and yesterday it had finally crumbled into dust. I need to call her, I said, standing up. I need to hear her explain it. Chloe, don't, he said, grabbing my hand. You're just going to get yourself more worked up. She's not going to give you a straight answer. She's going to gaslight you and make you feel like you're the crazy one. He was right, of course. That was her signature move. But I had to try. I pulled my hand away and walked into the living room, my phone in my hand. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my chest. She answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. Good morning, sweetheart. Are you recovering from your big day? Mom, we need to talk about the gift, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Her tone immediately shifted, becoming defensive. Oh, for heaven's sake, Chloe. Are you still on about that? I already told you. It was a joke, a little piece of satire. It's not my fault if nobody has a sense of humor anymore. It wasn't a joke, and you know it, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. Why did you do it? Why would you put David's name on there? Tell me the truth. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing. The truth, she finally said, her voice dripping with mock pity, is that you are being overly emotional. It's the pregnancy hormones. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I thought it would be a funny, symbolic gesture of how David has stepped up as a father figure since you and Liam got together. I'm sorry if your delicate sensibilities were offended. Every word was a carefully crafted insult, designed to make me feel small and hysterical. She was twisting it, painting herself as the victim of my irrationality. A father figure? I repeated, incredulous. You think giving me a fake birth certificate with his name on it is a symbolic gesture? That's sick, Mom. And you're lying. I saw David's face. He was terrified. You did this to hurt him or to send a message. Which one is it? I don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, her voice turning cold and hard. David was probably just embarrassed by your over-the-top reaction. You created a scene, Chloe. You should be apologizing to me and to your guests for making everyone so uncomfortable. I felt a surge of pure rage. She was trying to flip the entire situation, to make me the villain in her twisted narrative. I'm not apologizing for anything, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I want a real answer. Why did you do it? I've already given you one, she said coolly. If you don't want to accept it, that's your problem. I have to go now. I'm having lunch with a friend. We're going to talk about how ungrateful children can be. And then she hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking with fury. Liam had been right. The conversation had solved nothing. It had only made things worse. She had not denied it. Not really. She had just deflected and insulted me until I was too angry to think straight. She was hiding something, and she was willing to destroy my emotional well-being to keep it hidden. Liam came into the room, his face etched with concern. "What did she say?" "Exactly what you predicted she'd say," I replied, my voice hollow. "She said I'm hormonal and overly sensitive. She said it was a symbolic gesture. She called me ungrateful." He pulled me into his arms, and this time I let him. I buried my face in his chest, the anger giving way to a profound sense of sorrow. "She's my own mother, Liam," I whispered. "How could she be so cruel?" "I don't know," he said, stroking my hair. "I really don't. But we can't let her do this to us. We have a baby coming. We need to focus on that. We need to be a team." I nodded, but in my heart I knew it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just about my mother's cruelty. It was about the question she had planted in my mind. A question that was now taking root and growing, its thorny vines wrapping around my heart. Was David my father? Was my husband my half-brother? Was the baby I was carrying the product of a lie so monstrous I could barely comprehend it? I knew then that I could not let it go. For the sake of my own sanity, and for the sake of my unborn child, I had to find out the truth, no matter what it cost me. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and quiet anxiety. Liam was determined to put the incident behind us. He treated it like a bad dream, refusing to speak of it, focusing instead on baby names and nursery decorations. He was building a fortress of denial around us, and he expected me to live inside it with him, but I could not. The question was a constant hum in the back of my mind. I started to watch David differently. We had Sunday dinner at his and Mary's house, a weekly tradition. I used to feel comfortable there, at home. Now, the house felt like enemy territory. I studied David's every move, his every word. I looked for similarities between us. Did we have the same eyes? The same shape of our hands? I searched for any sign, any clue that would confirm or deny the terrifying possibility. He was a nervous wreck around me. He avoided my gaze, kept his answers to my questions short and clipped. He, who had always been so talkative and warm, was now a bundle of tense energy. Mary noticed it too. "Is everything all right, David?" she asked during dinner, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You've barely said 2 words all evening." "I'm fine," he muttered, pushing his food around his plate. "Just tired. Long week at work." It was a flimsy excuse. I glanced at Liam, hoping he would see what I saw, the blatant discomfort, the obvious guilt. But Liam was laughing at a story Mary was telling, completely oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant. He did not want to see it, so he did not. My mother was also acting strangely. She kept sending me cheerful texts filled with heart emojis, asking about the baby as if nothing had happened. She was trying to paper over the gaping wound she had created with a thin veneer of normalcy. I did not respond. I could not bring myself to engage in her charade. My isolation grew. Liam was my husband, my partner, but he was not my ally in this. He was on his family's side, the side of keeping secrets and maintaining the peace. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would not think I was crazy. I called my best friend, Sarah. I met her for coffee, the white box tucked into my bag. I told her everything, from the moment my mother handed me the gift to the disastrous phone call afterward. I watched her face as she listened, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and finally, to outrage on my behalf. "Chloe, that is the most twisted, manipulative thing I have ever heard," she said when I finished. "Your mother is a monster." Hearing her validate my feelings was like a dam breaking inside me. The tears I had been holding back for days finally came. "He thinks I'm crazy, Sarah," I sobbed. "Liam thinks I'm hormonal and paranoid. He just wants me to forget about it." "Of course he does," she said, her voice full of sympathy. "His entire world is built on the idea that his father is a good man and his family is perfect. Your mother just threatened that whole foundation. It's easier for him to believe you're overreacting than to face the possibility that it's all a lie." She was right. Liam was protecting himself, his family, his entire identity. I could not blame him, but it still hurt. What do I do? I asked, wiping my eyes. I feel like I'm going crazy. I keep looking at David, trying to see myself in him. I'm questioning my whole life. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. You're not crazy, she said firmly. Your gut is telling you something is wrong. You need to listen to it. You need to find proof, one way or the other. Then you can't be gaslit anymore. Proof? What kind of proof? Well, the obvious answer is a DNA test, she said matter-of-factly. But I don't see David volunteering for that anytime soon. No, I agreed. And I can't even mention it to Liam. He would lose his mind. Okay, so DNA is out for now, she said, thinking. What else? Are there old letters? Photos? Anything from that time period when your mom was pregnant with you? A memory sparked in my mind. My mother had a collection of old shoe boxes in the back of her closet. They were filled with memorabilia from her youth. Report cards, concert tickets, photographs, and letters. She called them her time capsules. I had not looked through them since I was a teenager. She has boxes, I said slowly. Old memory boxes, in her closet. Sarah's eyes lit up. There you go. You need to get into those boxes. She's going on that cruise with her friends next week, right? I nodded. For 10 days. It's perfect, Sarah said. You have the key to her house. You go over there while she's gone and you search. You read every letter, look at every photo. The answer has to be in there somewhere. The idea made me nervous. It felt like a huge violation of her privacy. But what choice did I have? She had violated my entire life. My sense of self. Snooping through her old letters seemed like a small price to pay for the truth. Okay, I said, a new sense of resolve hardening within me. Okay, I'll do it. The week leading up to my mother's cruise was agonizingly slow. I played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law and the loving wife, all while my mind was consumed with a singular purpose. I had to get into those boxes. Liam remained cautiously optimistic, believing that with my mother out of the picture for a while, the tension would dissipate and I would come to my senses, as he so gently put it. He had no idea I was not planning on letting it go. I was planning on digging deeper. The day my mother left, she called me from the airport, her voice breezy and carefree. Just wanted to say goodbye, sweetie. Be good and take care of my grandbaby. I'll bring you back something nice. Have a safe trip, Mom, I said, my voice neutral. It was a struggle to keep the resentment out of my tone. She was jetting off to the Caribbean while I was left to clean up the emotional hurricane she had unleashed. The next day, I told Liam I was going to spend the afternoon with Sarah. It was a half-truth. I was meeting Sarah, but first I had a stop to make. I drove to my mother's house, the spare key feeling heavy and illicit in my hand. The house was silent and still, smelling faintly of her floral perfume. It felt strange to be there without her, like I was an intruder in my own childhood home. I went straight to her bedroom. Her closet was meticulously organized, a testament to her need for control. In the back, on the top shelf, were the 4 shoeboxes, just as I remembered. I pulled them down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sat on the floor, took a deep breath, and opened the first one. It was a flood of memories from my high school years. Photos of me with my friends, my prom corsage, my graduation tassel. Nothing of interest. The second box was from her 20s before I was born. It was filled with photos of her and her friends, laughing, carefree. There were letters from her college roommates, filled with gossip and inside jokes. I was starting to lose hope when I opened the third box. This one was different. It was less organized, more chaotic. The letters were not from girlfriends, but from men. Love letters, mostly. My mother had been very popular, it seemed. And then I found it. A small bundle of letters tied together with a faded red ribbon tucked into the corner of the box. The handwriting was not my mother's. It was masculine, elegant, and vaguely familiar. I untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. The date at the top made my breath catch in my throat. It was from 29 years ago, just a few months before I would have been conceived. I scanned down to the signature at the bottom. My blood ran cold. All my love, D. D. It had to be David. I read the letter, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the fragile paper still. My dearest Karen, it began. I can't stop thinking about last night. I know it was a mistake. I know we crossed a line that we can never uncross. Mary, she would be devastated. But I can't bring myself to regret it. Being with you felt right. More right than anything has felt in a very long time. This secret is ours, and we must guard it with our lives. But know this, I will never forget it. I will never forget you. There were more letters, half a dozen of them. They painted a sordid, heartbreaking picture. An affair. A brief, passionate, and reckless affair between my mother and my husband's father. They spoke of stolen moments, of guilt, and of a deep emotional connection that terrified them both. The last letter was dated 2 months later. Karen, it read, we have to stop this. We are playing with fire, and we are going to destroy everyone we care about. Mary suspects something. She asked me last night if I was happy. I lied to her face. I can't live like this. We can't see each other anymore. Not alone. It has to end. Please understand. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. D. And that was it. The letters stopped. There was no mention of a pregnancy, no hint that I was a product of their affair. But the timeline was undeniable. It fit perfectly. My mother had always told me that my biological father was a man she had a brief fling with before he moved away. A man who never knew she was pregnant. She had lied. She had been having an affair with a married man. A man whose son I would one day marry. I sat there on the floor of my mother's closet, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard certainty. This was the truth. The birth certificate was not a joke. It was a threat. It was my mother's way of telling David that she still held the power, that she could blow his life apart with a single word. And she had used me and my baby shower as her weapon. I carefully photographed each letter with my phone. I could not take them. She would know I had been there. I tied the red ribbon back around them and placed the bundle exactly where I had found it. I put the boxes back on the shelf, making sure everything looked untouched. As I left the house, locking the door behind me, I felt like a different person. The naive, happy woman who had walked in an hour ago was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone with a core of ice where her heart used to be. I drove straight to Sarah's house. I did not even say hello when she opened the door. I just walked in, sat on her couch, and handed her my phone. "Read them," I said. She scrolled through the photos of the letters, her eyes widening with each one. When she was done, she looked at me, her face pale. "Oh, Chloe," she whispered. "I am so, so sorry." "Don't be," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'm not. I'm angry." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to show them to Liam. But what will that do? He'll be devastated. His whole life will be a lie. And he'll just try to find another explanation. He'll say it was just an affair, that it doesn't prove anything about me." "He might be right," Sarah said gently. "The letters prove they had an affair. They don't prove he's your father. The timing is suspicious, but it's not definitive proof." She was right. I needed more. The letters were a huge piece of the puzzle, but they were not the whole picture. If I confronted them now, they would just deny it. David would say the affair was a mistake from his past that had nothing to do with me. My mother would call me a snooping, malicious daughter who was trying to ruin lives. They would band together and turn Liam against me. I would be the hysterical, pregnant woman again. "So what do?" I asked. feeling a wave of hopelessness. "You need that DNA test," Sarah said, her voice firm. "It's the only thing they can't deny. It's the only thing that will give you absolute certainty." "But how?" I asked in frustration. "I can't ask him for a sample. He would never give it to me." Sarah leaned forward, a determined look in her eyes. "You don't ask him," she said. "You take it." The idea was shocking, but it also felt like the only path forward. How could I possibly do that? "You go to their house," she explained, her mind already working through the logistics. "For dinner or just to visit. You watch him. He'll drink from a glass, use a fork, maybe a napkin. As soon as he's done with it and not looking, you grab it. You put it in a plastic bag you have ready in your purse. You send it to a lab. It's that simple." It sounded like something out of a spy movie. It was deceptive and underhanded. It was exactly the kind of thing my mother would do. And maybe that was what it took. To beat her at her own game, I had to become a little more like her. "I'll do it," I said, the decision settling in my gut with a heavy finality. Sunday dinner, this Sunday. The next few days were the longest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal. I talked to Liam about the baby. I answered his questions about my day. I smiled and laughed in all the right places. But inside, I was a coiled spring of tension. I felt like a secret agent living a double life. My mission was clear: obtain David's DNA. I ordered a home paternity test kit online. It arrived in a discreet package, which I hid in the bottom of my closet. It contained sterile swabs for me and a special envelope for the alleged father's sample. The instructions said a used toothbrush, a drinking glass, or even a cigarette butt would work. David did not smoke, but he did drink iced tea with every meal. A glass would be my target. On Sunday, as we prepared to leave for his parents' house, Liam looked at me, a hopeful smile on his face. "You seem better today," he said. "More like yourself." "I'm feeling better," I lied, my heart aching with the deception. I wanted to tell him everything, to show him the letters and share the terrible burden of this secret. But I could not. Not yet. I had to protect him and myself until I had the undeniable truth. Dinner was as tense as I expected. David was even more withdrawn than the previous week. He barely spoke, his eyes darting around nervously. He was a man living on a precipice, terrified of the fall. I felt a flicker of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the fire of my anger. He had participated in this lie for my entire life. He had watched me marry his son. He did not deserve my pity. I watched him like a hawk. He drank from his usual tall glass of iced tea. My purse was on the floor by my chair, a Ziploc bag tucked inside. My hands were sweating. I felt my baby kick, a small reminder of what was at stake. This was not just for me. It was for my child. My child deserved to know the truth of their family, no matter how ugly it was. The opportunity came after dinner. Mary and Liam were in the kitchen, clearing the plates and talking about a new movie they had seen. I stayed at the table with David, pretending to finish my water. He stood up, clutching his empty iced tea glass. "Well, I'm going to go watch the game," he announced, his voice strained. He started to walk toward the kitchen. My heart pounded. This was my only chance. "David, wait," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He stopped and turned, a look of apprehension on his face. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry if I've been a bit distant lately," I said, improvising. "Pregnancy has been making me feel all over the place, and I know the baby shower was awkward. I'm sorry for my part in that." It was a calculated move. By apologizing, I was disarming him, making him think I was backing down, that I had accepted the joke narrative. It worked. A wave of relief washed over his face. "Oh, Chloe, don't be silly," he said, his voice regaining some of its old warmth. "You have nothing to apologize for. That was all on your mother. We all know how she can be." He set his glass down on the dining table next to my own. "We're family. We're past it." He smiled at me, a genuine, relieved smile, and then he turned and walked into the living room. My heart was racing. The glass was sitting right there. It was now or never. With a shaking hand, I glanced toward the kitchen. I could still hear Liam and Mary laughing. I quickly grabbed the glass, my fingers closing around the cool, smooth surface. I slipped it into the Ziploc bag in my purse, the clinking sound deafeningly loud in the quiet room. I zipped my purse shut and stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I had done it. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. I made excuses about being tired, and Liam and I left soon after. The entire drive home, I was acutely aware of the glass in my purse, the key to my past and my future. When we got home, I waited until Liam was in the shower before I took it out. I carefully swabbed the rim of the glass with the collection materials from the kit, my hands steady now. I packaged the sample according to the instructions, filled out the forms with trembling fingers, and sealed the prepaid envelope. The next morning, on my way to work, I dropped the package into a mailbox. As it disappeared into the slot, I felt a profound sense of both terror and relief. There was no turning back now. In 7 to 10 business days, I would have my answer. The waiting would be the hardest part. The days crawled by. Each morning, I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Each night, I lay awake, my mind racing with possibilities. What if I was wrong? What if this was all a figment of my paranoid, pregnant imagination? I would have violated David's trust, betrayed my husband's faith, and destroyed my relationship with my mother for nothing. The shame of that possibility was almost as terrifying as the alternative. But then I would remember the letters. The affair was real. The timeline was real. The look on David's face was real. And my mother's cruelty was very, very real. I was not crazy. I was a woman on the verge of uncovering a truth that had been buried for nearly 30 years. Liam seemed to think my good mood from Sunday was permanent. He was relieved, chatty, and affectionate. He thought the storm had passed. I felt a pang of guilt every time he kissed me, every time he touched my belly and spoke to our child. He had no idea our entire life was a ticking time bomb, and I was the one waiting for the timer to hit 0. I confided in Sarah every day. She was my rock, the only person who knew the truth. "Any news?" She would text me each morning. "Not yet," I would reply. On the 8th business day, I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to concentrate on a spreadsheet, when an email notification popped up. The subject line read, "Your paternity test results are ready." My blood turned to ice. My hands started to shake. I could not breathe. I clicked the link, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I entered my case number and password. A PDF document loaded on my screen. I scrolled past the legal jargon, my eyes searching for the one part that mattered. And then I saw it. A table with numbers and percentages. At the bottom, in bold black letters, were the words I had both dreaded and craved. Based on the analysis of the DNA samples provided, the alleged father, David, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the child, Chloe. The probability of paternity is 99.999%. I stared at the screen, the words blurring through my tears. It was true. It was all true. David was my father. My husband's father was my father. Liam, my kind, loving husband, the father of my child, was my half-brother. A wave of nausea washed over me. The baby I was carrying, the child I loved more than anything in the world, was the product of incest. A child born from a web of lies so tangled and so dark, it threatened to suffocate me. The anger and sadness I had felt before were nothing compared to this. This was a profound, soul-shattering horror. My mother had not just been cruel, she had been monstrous. She had known. She had known all along. She had watched me fall in love with Liam. She had smiled at our wedding. She had celebrated my pregnancy. All the while, she had known that she was letting her daughter marry her own brother. And David, he had known too. He had stood at our wedding and given a speech about how happy he was to welcome me into the family. He was not welcoming me. He was watching his two children get married, and he had said nothing. In that moment, any lingering pity I had for him vanished. He and my mother were not just flawed, guilt-ridden people. They were villains. They had sentenced me, Liam, and our innocent child to a life built on a grotesque secret. I closed my laptop. I stood up, walked out of my office, and told my boss I was not feeling well and needed to go home. I drove, but I do not remember the journey. My mind was a maelstrom of rage and grief. When I got home, I went straight to the nursery. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by the tiny crib, the rocking chair, the soft, sweet-smelling baby clothes. This room was supposed to be a sanctuary of hope and love. Now it felt tainted, a monument to my family's depravity. I sank into the rocking chair and finally let myself sob. I cried for the life I thought I had. I cried for the husband I had to leave. I cried for my baby, who would be born into this mess. And I cried for the little girl who had grown up without a father, never knowing he was there all along, hiding in plain sight. The grief was a tidal wave, and it consumed me. But as the hours passed, the wave receded, leaving something else in its place. A cold, hard, and unshakable resolve. They had done this to me. To us. They had played with our lives like they were chess pieces in their own selfish game. And I was not going to let them get away with it. I was not the hysterical, pregnant woman they thought I was. I was a daughter and a mother who had been wronged in the most profound way imaginable. They thought their secret was their power. But now, I had the truth. And the truth was my weapon. I began to plan. I could not just drop this bomb on Liam, it would shatter him. And a private confrontation with my mother and David would be useless. They would deny, deflect, and manipulate, just as they had before. No, this required something more. It required an audience. It required a stage. It required a moment where they could not run, could not hide, and could not lie their way out of what they had done. I would host a dinner party, a small, intimate family dinner. Just me, Liam, his parents, and my mother. I would bring them all together, into my home, and I would burn their world to the ground. And I would do it with a smile on my face. The age of me being their victim was over. The age of their reckoning had just begun. The first step was to get Liam on board with the dinner, without raising his suspicions. I waited until that evening, after my storm of grief had subsided into a chilling calm. When he came home from work, I greeted him with a kiss. I had washed my face and put on a clean shirt. I was an actress in the final scene of my own life's tragedy. "You were right," I said, my voice soft and contrite. "I've been letting my mom get to me. I've been letting this whole stupid joke thing spiral out of control. It's not fair to you or to our families." Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with relief. He pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Chloe, I'm so glad to hear you say that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been so worried about you." "I know," I said, leaning into him, my stomach twisting with the lie. "And I think we need to clear the air. All of us. I want to have everyone over for dinner on Saturday. Your parents, my mom, just us. So I can apologize for being so distant and we can all move forward before the baby comes." He pulled back, beaming. "That's a fantastic idea," he said. "Really? You're sure you're up for it?" "I'm sure," I said, forcing a smile. "It's time." He was so happy, so relieved that he did not see the coldness in my eyes. He did not see that this was not an olive branch. It was a declaration of war. The next person I had to call was my mother. She was still on her cruise, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. I sent her a text message. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're having fun. I'd like to have you over for a family dinner on Saturday when you get back. It's time for us to talk and move past all this." Her reply came almost instantly. "Of course, sweetie. I'd love that. I knew you'd come around. See? All you needed was a little space. Kisses." Her condescending tone made my blood boil, but I ignored it. She was walking right into my trap. Then I called Mary. She was the innocent party in all of this, the person who had been betrayed for over 30 years. She deserved to know the truth, but I could not be the one to tell her, not before the main event. She answered the phone, her voice warm and kind as always. "Hi, Chloe, dear. Is everything all right?" "Everything's great, Mary," I said cheerfully. "I was actually calling to invite you and David over for dinner on Saturday. I'm inviting my mom, too. I just want to put all that awkwardness from the shower behind us and have a nice family meal." "Oh, what a lovely idea," she said, her relief palpable. "David has been so worried. He'll be so pleased. Of course, we'll be there." The stage was set. The actors were all confirmed. All I had to do was wait. The next few days were spent in a state of suspended animation. I cooked, I cleaned, I prepared my home for the most important night of my life. Liam was a doting, helpful partner, completely oblivious to the fact that he was helping me prepare the gallows for his own family. I printed out the DNA test results, the damning percentages stark and clear on the white paper. I put the print out in an envelope. I also retrieved the fake birth certificate my mother had given me. I placed both items in the drawer of the sideboard in our dining room, ready for their grand entrance. I also had the photos of the letters on my phone, my final piece of irrefutable evidence. On Saturday morning, my mother arrived home from her trip. She called me, talking a mile a minute about the beautiful beaches and the delicious food. I listened patiently, making non-committal sounds of agreement. "I can't wait to see you tonight, Mom," I said when she finally paused for breath. "Me too, sweetie," she said. "I've missed you." The casual lie of it all was breathtaking. That evening, as I put the finishing touches on the roast chicken, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I was not nervous. I was not afraid. I was ready. The doorbell rang and Liam went to get it. It was his parents. David looked tense, but Mary was smiling, holding a bouquet of flowers. "These are for you, dear," she said, handing them to me. "It's so good to see you looking so well." "Thank you, Mary," I said, taking them. I met David's eyes over the top of the flowers. He gave me a weak, hesitant smile. He had no idea what was coming. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang again. It was my mother, tanned and glowing, wearing a brightly colored dress. She swept into the house, giving me a theatrical hug. "Chloe, darling, you look wonderful. Pregnancy agrees with you." She greeted everyone with loud, effusive kisses. She was the life of the party, the center of attention, just as she always wanted to be. I let her play her part. The higher she flew, the harder she would fall. We sat down to dinner. The conversation was stilted at first, full of polite small talk about my mother's trip and the weather. Liam, bless his innocent heart, tried his best to keep things flowing. I mostly stayed quiet, eating my food, watching them. Watching the three people who had built my life on a foundation of lies. My mother, Karen, was holding court, telling an animated story about a man she met on the cruise. David was pushing his food around his plate, a mirror image of his behavior the week before. Mary was trying to engage him, her brow furrowed with concern. And Liam was sitting next to me, his hand occasionally resting on my back, a comforting gesture that now felt like a brand. Finally, when there was a lull in the conversation, I knew it was time. I put down my fork and knife, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. All eyes turned to me. "I'm so glad we could all do this," I began, my voice calm and even. "I asked you all here tonight because I wanted to apologize." My mother preened, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. Liam squeezed my shoulder encouragingly. "I want to apologize for not understanding the joke sooner," I continued. My eyes locked on my mother. The one from the baby shower. It was a very elaborate joke. And it took me a while, but I think I finally get it. The mood in the room shifted instantly. The air grew thick with tension. My mother's smile tightened. David froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Chloe, I thought we agreed to move past that," Liam said, his voice low and warning. "We are moving past it," I said, not taking my eyes off my mother. We're moving right through it, to the truth. I turned my gaze to David. It wasn't a joke, was it, David? He stared at me, his face turning ashen. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. What on earth are you talking about, Chloe? My mother cut in, her voice sharp. Of course it was a joke. You're starting to make a scene again. Am I? I said, a small, cold smile on my lips. I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I opened the drawer and took out the fake birth certificate. I walked back to the table and placed it in the center, next to the salt shaker. It all started with this, I said. A gag gift. A symbolic gesture. I let the words hang in the air for a moment. But it got me thinking. It got me digging. I pulled out my phone. I found some things in one of your memory boxes, Mom. Some old letters. I looked directly at David. Letters you wrote to her, 29 years ago, about your mistake, about the secret you had to guard with your lives. David made a small, choking sound. Mary gasped, her eyes darting between her husband and my mother. David? What is she talking about? She's talking nonsense. My mother spat, her face a mask of fury. She went through my private things. She's twisting things, trying to cause trouble because she's an ungrateful, dramatic child. David? Mary said again, her voice trembling. Did you have an affair with her? David could not look at his wife. He just stared at his plate, his silence a confession. It was more than an affair, wasn't it? I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I reached into the sideboard drawer again and pulled out the second envelope. I placed it on the table next to the birth certificate. Because the timing was very, very interesting, so I decided to get something that couldn't be twisted. Something that doesn't lie. I opened the envelope and slid the DNA test results onto the table. The probability of paternity is 99.999%. I read out loud, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent room. I looked up and met David's terrified eyes. Hello, Dad. The world seemed to stop. Mary let out a strangled sob, her hand flying to her mouth. Liam shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He stared at the paper, then at me, then at his father, his face a canvas of horror and disbelief. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. My mother was finally silent, her face white with shock. She had not expected this. She had underestimated me. She thought she was the one with all the power, all the secrets. She had never imagined I would find a secret of my own, one that was bigger and more destructive than hers. It's true, Liam, I said, my voice filled with a sorrow so deep it felt like it would break me. He's my father, which makes you my brother. Liam stumbled back, shaking his head, his eyes wide with a dawning, unbearable comprehension. No, no, no. He kept repeating, as if the words could change the reality laid out on the table. He looked at his mother, Mary, who was now openly weeping, her body shaking with silent sobs. Then his eyes fell on our baby, my belly, the child we had created together. The full, monstrous weight of the situation crashed down on him. Our baby, he choked out, his voice cracking. Oh God, our baby. The room erupted into chaos. My mother finally found her voice, and it was a shriek of self-preservation. I did it for you, Chloe, she screamed, her eyes wild. I did it all for you. I didn't want you to be alone. I saw how happy you were with Liam, how well the family treated you. I wanted you to be taken care of. I was protecting you. Protecting me? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You let me marry my brother. You sat at our wedding and smiled. You celebrated when I told you I was pregnant with my nephew. That's not protection. That's monstrous. You did this for you. You did this because you are a selfish, cruel woman who couldn't stand to see me happy without you being the center of it all. You don't understand, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a narcissist who had been caught. I turned my attention to David, who was still sitting frozen, a broken man. "And you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You stood by and let this happen. For 28 years, you let me believe I was fatherless. You let your son fall in love with your daughter. You're a coward. The worst kind of coward." Mary finally spoke, her voice ragged with grief. She looked at her husband of over 30 years, the man she had loved and trusted. "All this time, David," she whispered, her voice shaking with betrayal. "Our whole life. A lie." He finally looked at her, his face crumbling. "Mary, I'm so sorry," he stammered. "Sorry doesn't fix this," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Nothing can fix this." And then there was Liam, my husband, my brother. He was standing by the wall, his face ashen, looking at me with eyes I no longer recognized. They were filled with a pain so profound I could feel it across the room. We were the victims here, he and I and our unborn child. We were the collateral damage in their ancient selfish war. "I think you should all leave now," I said, my voice returning to its calm, icy resolve. "My mother, my father, you need to leave my house." My mother started to protest, but I cut her off. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "If you are not out of this house in 1 minute, I will call the police." She stared at me, her mouth agape, finally realizing she had no power here anymore. She grabbed her purse and practically ran from the room. David stood up slowly, his body stooped as if under a great weight. He looked at Mary, then at Liam, then at me. There were no words. He turned and walked out, a ghost leaving the scene of his own haunting. Mary was the last to leave. She paused at the door, her face a mess of tears. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and horror. "I'm sorry, Chloe," she whispered, "for all of it." Then she too was gone. And then it was just Liam and me again, standing in the wreckage. But this time, the wreckage was not just a few balloons and some hurt feelings. It was our entire life, our marriage, our family, all of it, burned to ashes. He would not look at me. He just stared at the empty doorway, his body rigid with shock. "Liam," I said softly. He finally turned to me and his face was a mask of pure agony. "Don't," he said, his voice hoarse. "Just don't." He walked past me, not touching me, and went upstairs. I heard our bedroom door close. The sound was as final as a coffin lid shutting. I sank into a chair at the dining table, surrounded by the evidence of my ruined life. The fake birth certificate, the real DNA test, the remnants of a dinner that had become a trial. I had done it. I had exposed the truth. But I had not expected the victory to feel so much like a funeral. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to the silence of the house. The silence was broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the frantic, fluttering heartbeat of the baby inside me. My child, my nephew, the innocent center of this entire catastrophe. Eventually, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Liam came back down, carrying a hastily packed duffel bag. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes red-rimmed. He did not look at me. He walked to the front door. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice small. "I don't know," he said, his back to me. "A hotel. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you." The words were a physical blow. "Liam, this isn't my fault," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I didn't do this." He finally turned, and the anger in his eyes startled me. "Didn't you?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You knew, and you planned this whole ambush. You sat there and watched them walk into a trap. You destroyed our family tonight, Chloe. On purpose. They destroyed our family 30 years ago. I cried, standing up. They lied to us. They let us live a lie. I just brought the truth to light. They deserve to be exposed. We deserve to know. And what about me? He shouted, his voice finally breaking. Did I deserve this? To find out in the middle of a dinner party that my wife is my sister? That my father is a monster? That our child. He trailed off, unable to say the words. He shook his head, a look of utter revulsion on his face. You should have told me. You should have come to me first. And what would you have done, Liam? I shot back, my own anger rising to meet his. You would have denied it. You would have told me I was crazy, that I was hormonal. You would have defended him. You chose their side from the very beginning, the side of secrets and lies. I had to do it this way. It was the only way to make you all see the truth. He just stared at me, his face a mixture of pain and fury. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said softly. The words shattered the last piece of my heart. He was a victim in this too, but in his pain, he was lashing out at the only person he could. Me, the messenger. I'm the same person I've always been, I said, my voice trembling. I'm just not willing to live a lie to make everyone else comfortable anymore. He shook his head again. A final, defeated gesture. I can't, he whispered. I can't. He opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. I was alone. Utterly and completely alone. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff, my body aching. The house was cold and silent. For a moment, I thought it had all been a terrible nightmare. But then I saw the dining room table, still littered with the plates and glasses from our last supper. And the 2 documents, lying there like tombstones. It was all real. My first call was to Sarah. I told her everything that had happened, my voice a dull monotone. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. I'm on my way, she finally said. Don't be alone right now. An hour later, she was there, wrapping me in a hug that I desperately needed. She helped me clean up the dining room, throwing away the remnants of the disastrous meal. She put the birth certificate and the DNA test back in their envelopes and handed them to me. You need to call a lawyer, Chloe, she said, her voice gentle but firm. You need to figure out what comes next. She was right. My marriage was over. Legally, it had never even been valid. I found a family lawyer online and made an appointment for the next day. Walking into that office felt surreal. I was a pregnant woman, about to annul my marriage to my half-brother. It sounded like the plot of a trashy television show, not my actual life. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis, listened to my story with a calm, professional demeanor that I found immensely comforting. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She just took notes. Well, she said when I had finished, this is certainly a unique situation, but legally it's quite clear. Your marriage is void due to consanguinity. We will file for an annulment. It should be straightforward given the circumstances and your DNA evidence. What about the baby? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. The baby is legally your child, she explained. Liam, or rather your brother, will have no legal paternal rights unless you choose to grant them. However, your biological father, David, has a significant financial responsibility here. Given the extreme fraud and emotional distress involved, we can pursue a very substantial settlement from him. For child support. For your own damages. He allowed his 2 biological children to enter into a marriage and conceive a child. The liability here is enormous. The thought of taking David's money felt strange, but Ms. Davis put it in perspective. This is not about revenge, Chloe, she said. This is about securing your child's future. A future that has been profoundly complicated by the actions of your parents. He owes you this. He owes it to his grandchild. She was right. I was a single mother now, with a child who would carry the genetic and emotional baggage of this secret forever. David was not going to get off scot-free. He was going to pay. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional exhaustion. Ms. Davis sent a letter to David's lawyer, outlining our demands: a full annulment, a significant multi-million-dollar trust fund for the baby, to be paid in full immediately, and a gag order preventing him or my mother from ever speaking about this to anyone, ever again. I expected a fight, but there was none. David agreed to everything without a single negotiation. His lawyer informed Ms. Davis that David was ruined. His wife, Mary, had left him and filed for divorce. His reputation, which he had guarded so carefully his entire life, was hanging by a thread. He would pay any price for my silence. My mother tried to contact me several times. She left long, rambling voicemails, alternating between tearful apologies and vicious accusations. She called me a homewrecker, a money grabber. She said I had destroyed her life. I never listened to the full messages. I just deleted them and then blocked her number. I blocked her on social media. I cut her out of my life as cleanly and completely as a surgeon removing a tumor. The hardest part was Liam. He sent me a few texts asking how I was, how the baby was. I responded with short, polite answers. We were like strangers, orbiting the same tragedy. A few weeks after the dinner, he texted me and asked if he could come get the rest of his things. I made sure I was out of the house when he came. I asked Sarah to be there instead. I could not face him. When I came home, the house felt empty. His closet was cleared out. His side of the bathroom sink was bare. All the little traces of our life together were gone. The only thing he had left was a single envelope on the kitchen counter. My name was written on it in his familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a letter. "Chloe," it began. "I don't know what to say. I've been trying to write this for weeks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I acted that night. I was hurt and confused, and I blamed you. That wasn't fair. You were a victim in this, just like me. More than me. I think about you and the baby every minute. I hope you are both healthy. I know things are complicated. I know we can't be what we were. But I loved you. The life we had, it felt real to me. And I will always be grateful for that time, even if it was built on a lie. I don't know what the future holds for us, or for the baby. I'm so confused. I'm angry at my father, at your mother. I can't even speak to them. My whole world has been turned upside down. Please take care of yourself. Take care of the baby. Maybe one day we can talk. When the dust settles, if it ever does. Liam." I cried as I read the letter. I cried for him, for the good man he was, trapped in this impossible situation. I cried for the love we had lost. He was not just my husband. He was my best friend. And I missed him. But I knew he was right. We could never go back. The truth was a wall between us now, impenetrable and permanent. As my due date approached, I settled into a new, quiet life. Sarah was my constant companion, my birthing partner, my sister in all but blood. The trust fund from David was established, a staggering sum of money that ensured my child would want for nothing. It was blood money, but I accepted it. It was the price of their silence, the cost of my freedom. The day my daughter was born was the best and most complicated day of my life. She was beautiful, perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes. As I held her in my arms for the first time, I felt a love so fierce and so pure, it eclipsed all the darkness that had come before. I named her Lily, a symbol of rebirth and new beginnings. As I looked at her perfect little face, I could see traces of myself. But I could also see him. I could see Liam. She had his eyes. It was a bittersweet reminder of what we had lost, and a permanent testament to the truth we had found. A week after I brought Lily home, a package arrived. It was a small, beautifully wrapped gift. There was no return address. I opened it. Inside was a tiny silver locket. The card simply said, For Lily, I am so sorry. M. Mary. My heart ached for her. She was another innocent, her life destroyed by the same lie that had ruined mine. I put the locket away in a safe place. Maybe one day, I would tell Lily about her grandmother, the one who had loved her, even from a distance. My life found a new rhythm. It was a quiet life, centered around my daughter. The pain of the betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But the love for Lily was stronger. She was my reason to get up in the morning, my reason to heal, my reason to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. I never heard from David again. I heard through the grapevine that he sold his business and moved away, a disgraced man living in self-imposed exile. My mother, I heard, was telling everyone that I had a mental breakdown and had run off with a fantasy about my parentage, trying desperately to salvage her own reputation. No one believed her. Her malicious performance at my baby shower had been too public, too strange. She had isolated herself with her own lies. One day, about a year after Lily was born, I was at the park, pushing her on the swings. I saw a man standing by a tree, watching us. My heart stopped. It was Liam. He looked older, tired, but he smiled when he saw me. A sad, gentle smile. He walked over slowly. "She's beautiful, Chloe," he said, his eyes fixed on Lily, who was giggling as the swing went higher. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We stood in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the creaking of the swing set and Lily's happy laughter. "I'm in therapy," he said finally, trying to process all of this. "It's helping." "I'm glad," I said, and I was. I wanted him to be okay. I wanted him to find a way to be happy. "I'd like to be in her life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you'll let me, as her uncle. I know it's a lot to ask." I looked at him, at the man I had loved so deeply, the brother I had never known. And I looked at my daughter, his niece. She deserved to know him. She deserved all the love she could get, no matter how complicated it was. "I think she'd like that," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time in a long time. It was not a perfect ending. It was not the life I had dreamed of. But it was a beginning. A new one. For me, for Lily, and for the brother I was just getting to know. The secret that was meant to destroy me had, in the end, revealed a truth that set me free. My mother and father had lost everything they valued: family, respect, control. And I had gained the one thing that truly mattered: my daughter. And for her, I would build a world based not on secrets, but on a difficult, complicated, and resilient truth. They had tried to write my story for me, but now I was finally holding the pen.